The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello, friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week, we have several roster moves to discuss, some confirmed, some reported, and some rumored. We also have a few other pieces of Austin FC news to talk about. My name is Landon Cottam, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley. There for a minute, Landon, it reminded me of the New Year's Day live show when you couldn't remember what your opening line was for a minute, but you nailed it. Way to go.
I rely on these show notes a little too much, I discovered.
Yeah, I think we can't let today go by without something that we posted on social media, and I think you've probably seen everywhere for those of folks who are in Austin FC fandom. That is the 5-year anniversary of Austin FC being announced as the 27th Major League Soccer franchise by, hosted by Alexi Lalas with Don Garber, Steve Adler, and a host of friends of ours. And interestingly, Alexa, people I did not know that day, who didn't even know that were there that day, but have also been posting photos themselves. So it's a really cool way that this community has come together since that day. And you were playing drums that day, correct?
That's right. Yeah, I was
drum
in the very small at the time Murga that consisted of, I don't know, 4 people and then a bunch of drunken guys singing for the most part. But yeah, we ended up, I think, what's that bar called that took place at?
The Rustic Tap was the bar that the event took place at. Yeah.
And I think we had a different party there for Anthem back in the day too. And I'm getting all these things.
We did. I think it was the same year even. Anthem had like a South by Southwest party there at Rustic Tap. So that was kind of, I happened to be down there. On Friday, I had a meeting down there on Friday, and I was walking around downtown and walked past like the Rustic Tap and Parlor and Yard, which was the place next door that they sort of stashed us in when they realized they weren't ready for us. And everybody drank a bunch of Lone Star and got really obnoxious. But all those places, it's one thing, given the changing nature of Austin, it's really cool to see all those places like still in business, but there was a little bit of a throwback too. So after that, did you stick around like for the whole day? I remember that being the longest day of my life and still being home at 10. Still being home at 10:30 also, too?
Yes. I was trying to think if it was that day or a different day I was thinking of, but the day got a little fuzzier as it went along, and I'm not going to say why, but I was there until what felt like extremely late, but was not really all that late.
Yeah, I got home in the Uber thinking it was like 3 a.m, and my wife was like still sitting on the couch watching TV. I was like, why are you still awake? And she's like, because it's barely after 10. So yeah, that was a good day. It was good to relive those memories. Alex Rubio took a bunch of great photos that we shared online, and it's just, it's a good little part of the Austin history. It's great to be able to have the things to talk about now that we have to talk about now. And we already talked about New Year's Day, but do you want to let's tease like another live event, which the framework is still not been put together, but we're going to have a little get together in February.
Yeah. So this is going to be February 15th. Is that right, Jeremiah? Do we have that
February 15th,
in the books now?
Yes. It's on the books on Thursday, February 15th at 6:30.
Yeah. And so we're treating this as kind of like a live show recording / preseason get together kind of thing.
So yeah, it'll be a happy hour. It's going to be at the Amplify Credit Union Esperanza branch, which is close to the stadium, kind of across from the Domain. I think everybody's experience on New Year's Day was that a temperature-controlled environment would be very desirable for those of us. So thanks to folks at Amplify for helping us make that work, put it together, and there'll be a lot more details to come.
Yeah, and I think this one's going to be, the New Year's Day leaned more to the party end of the spectrum. I think this is going to be a bit more like live show end of the spectrum, but we'll still have a good time as well.
Yeah, it'll still be fun, and it will not be. We will get home in a reasonable hour and probably remember the day. So that'll be a difference from the other event we just talked about.
Jeremiah, before we get into the Austin FC news, I got a new toy that we are recording on right now. It's a little soundboard that I have on my desk here. And thanks to all of our Patreon members for making things like this possible to improve our equipment, make the show sound better. I wanted to mention it partly because I'm still kind of learning how to use it. And so if the show sounds slightly different or sounds a little worse, potentially, I haven't heard what this is going to sound like yet. It will get better. I'll learn how to use it and it'll get better. But also, I wanted to tell you, Jeremiah, that I have some fun new capabilities on this soundboard, and I can make all kinds of fun new sounds like. So there's a lot of preloaded ones that I don't know how often we'll use, like these, but then I can also make custom ones that we can drop in. And so the first one I put on there, I bet you could guess it if I gave you time, but it's
Think for nothing, you never.
I love it.
And
so
then,
anytime we can use that with anybody.
Yeah. And then the other one that I think we'll get some mileage out of is this one.
I guess you are MLS experts.
The most, yes, dismissive way to call somebody an expert. I'm very excited to be able to use that one. Actually, that not to spotlight the end of the show, but we may be able to break that one out again for sort of the last segment of this show.
Yeah. And anytime we talk about allocation money or anything like that. I also was going through player interviews and just found some funny, I don't know when I'll ever get a chance to use this, but I have this one on here too.
I'd rather me miss than, for example, Nick Lima.
I went through Ruben's interview that we did, and it was funny, but there's not a lot of like clippable ones, but I'll be adding to this little bank. Listeners, if you have any suggestions or want to send us any clips that you find, let us know. But yeah, hopefully I'll do my best to show some restraint using these sounds, but hopefully it'll be a fun new addition to the show. All right, let's jump into the news of the week. So I think one of the bigger things is training has started. All the current players that have signed have reported and started training. I guess they did like some fitness tests and stuff over the weekend. We're supposed to have their first day of training today, Monday. I'm not sure if that actually happened due to weather. And we were supposed to be there.
Yeah,
we
were supposed to be there.
Media availability. That also got canceled.
Yeah, so I believe the training got canceled, and I think the media availability got moved back to Thursday. So we thought we were going to have some more news. I think it was Josh Wolf and select players that were going to be available, but now we'll have more next week. I cannot make it out on Thursday, but I'm sure there will be a recording of some sort, hopefully, that we can get.
Yeah, I'm still going to do my best to go on Thursday, but I mean, I was really looking forward to going today. Partly just to get the new season started up, but also to see who's out there. Is there any new faces, any trialists or anything? I don't know if any people like that would be out there today or not. But maybe they will be by Thursday, so we can report back on that. I guess like updates that we got from training is the Austin FC social media accounts were reporting on the beep test. Do you know the details of the beep test for any listeners who aren't familiar?
It's basically there's two points. I think they had cones set up this time. They're 20 meters apart. And basically you have to go back and forth and reach the other side before the beep. And you go until there's only one person left who still can stay ahead of the beep. And so this time it was John Gallagher. I don't remember if he won last year or not. Gallagher.
I think they said he won last year as well.
Yeah. He's the fittest dude on the team. I think there's not a lot of doubt on that. So it's not surprising that he would be the person who would win this drill. But that was one thing that we got to see. I think hopefully Swoon Tower wise, there'll be a lot of content on there was a lot of photos and video of the guys arriving at practice for the first time, reporting in on Saturday. And I guess, do you want to go to this? We got to see this is a lot of North End pod sleuthing on training videos, but we got to see some of the FCito players that were training with the first team.
Yeah. And I don't think this is the ones that we saw, I don't think are super surprising, but it is good to have confirmation that these guys are out there. So I think the second team players that we saw photo evidence of out on the training field were Val Noel, Sebastian Pinot, Czech Torre, and then looking through the North End guys' Twitter feed today, there was one photo of what looked like maybe Sal Mazzaferro, but I don't know that it's conclusive necessarily that was him.
That's right.
Those four guys.
I've never seen that.
Guys we didn't see were like Joe Hafferty is a guy who maybe I'd predicted would get a chance at this. Just because we didn't see a photo of him doesn't mean he wasn't there. But maybe he wasn't there. We'll find out more of this later. But those four guys, like, they're there for sure.
Yeah. Do you have any expectations for any of those guys as far as being contributors of some sort? It seems like Phil West put a Verde All Day article out today suggesting that, there's opportunity for them to maybe be supplemental roster players this year and get a few minutes, maybe play in some cup competitions. But is there one of them you think like would possibly contribute to the first team more than the others?
I don't know that I would be able to say. I think there's a lot of circumstances that would play into that. But you used the word opportunity, and I think that is what this is. I don't think any of them are guaranteed a spot. I don't think any of them are necessarily even likely to get a first team spot, but they will get the opportunity. They're there the same as any of these other players. If they show that they can be useful to this team, they'll get their chance. I think we'll talk about international roster spots and stuff like that. That will come into play for some of these guys if like that's just adds an extra obstacle for them. They need to not only prove that they're worth a roster spot, but also worth an international roster spot. And so to convince the first team technical staff to use both of those spots on them, they're going to have to show it in preseason, and they're going to get that chance. But like I said, I wouldn't put money on any of them signing first team contracts.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That's the thing that is the international thing is something that's like really unique to MLS. I think that weighs heavier than most people really appreciate or think about when you're looking at sort of, especially the end of the supplemental roster, sort of the end of the roster. I guess another part-time frequent FC2 player we got news about also this week was Micah Burton officially signing a homegrown contract with Austin FC, making him effectively the first academy product to sign a homegrown.
Yeah,
contract.
I mean, and it's still debatable with him too, right? So Owen Wolff was the first homegrown player to be signed, which in Owen's situation, that is more of a roster designation and less of an actual descriptive term of what he was, because he trained with the academy with the first team for, I don't know, like a year or something, and then was signed to the first team as a homegrown. So Austin FC did not develop Owen Wolff as a youth prospect. Micah Burton came here from Minnesota, but he's been here for almost 4 years now, I think, coming at a pretty young age. So I think Austin can claim him at this point to a certain degree, right?
Yeah, I think he counts for sure. Even if he wasn't, he'd come up through the U12s or the whole system or whatever. So last year he made 24 appearances, 14 starts, 2 goals as Austin FC2, won the league title. For the 2024 season, like what do you think this means for Micah Burton and his contributions?
I mean, it's exciting for the development pipeline. It's a big first step. But I don't know that he's going to be ready for many, if any, first team minutes this year. He wasn't even a full-time starter for Austin FC 2. He's young. A lot can change at this age really quickly. So maybe he will get there. Maybe he will show that he's ready for minutes on the first team. But just based on what we saw last year, I would guess most of his minutes will still come with Austin FC 2 while he matures both in his game and just like develops a little bit physically. I think that's a thing that he'll still need to do. I saw some comparisons between him and the other homegrown player, Owen Wolff. Owen got signed to the first team at a younger age, but he was, I think, much more physically mature at that age than Micah is now, even. So, like, yeah, I don't know that he's anywhere close to as first team ready as Owen was a year and a half ago or whenever that was.
So then why sign him for to that contract? Do you think, I mean, one of the reasons you would do that is because there's other interests. Do you think that that's why he's maybe a first team guy?
Yeah. I mean, MLS teams sign homegrowns all the time, knowing that they're not ready for the first team, but it's locking him in for the future. It's having seen enough of him to know he's not ready now, but he's going to be ready. And so if I think Micah's going to be 18 in a few months, he turns 18, he finishes out his academy season, he could just walk and go sign for whoever he wants. And so as he does get closer to that age and closer to being ready, yeah, lock him in. And I think it was a 4-year deal with another option. So they would hold his rights for the next 5 to 7 years or something like it's going to be a long time because he's not going to be eligible for free agency. So at least 5 years, they'll hold his rights. If he wants to stay in MLS past that, they'll still have the ability to renegotiate a contract with him at that point. So it really is just about kind of securing a future for a youth prospect that you developed.
And the other news we got this week was that Sebastian Driussi obtained his green card to become a permanent resident of the United States. I guess the Austin FC fan part of me likes to believe that means that he's committed to being, Austin forever. I don't know that it necessarily does that. But it's good news. The most important news, I think, for Austin is that he now no longer occupies an international roster slot.
Right. Yeah. Good news for him as an individual. I'm sure it makes his life a little bit easier. But yeah, excellent news for the Austin FC roster build. We were trying to count this up before we started. Do you still have that pulled up, or can you name the international roster spots that are taken up at the moment?
So, yeah, I can. One of them is a guy we haven't talked about yet. Biro is one who's actually not on the roster yet, or not on the roster page on the website yet. Then it is Obrian, Rigoni, Pereira, and Väisänen.
Okay.
The players listed on the website as having international designation. So
including Biro, we have 5 international roster spots taken up. Danny Pereira announced that he had obtained his work visa. There's been no announcement from the club about how that affects green card status or anything like that. So until we hear otherwise, we're going to assume he still takes up an international roster spot.
I don't think there's any. There's another way to look at that.
But yeah, I mean, just going back to what we were talking about, these Austin FC 2 players in camp with the first team, I think the three that we mentioned would all take up international roster spots. So yeah, it makes it tough on them only having those 3 spots. And then we'll get into more player rumors in the second segment that maybe even fewer of those are going to be available in the not so distant future.
Yeah, so it becomes tight. I mean, I guess there's always the opposite. There's always the opportunity to acquire roster spots, right? We've seen Austin trade, either acquire or give away. It feels like international slots every year, almost, depending upon the need. But there's a cost for that. There's a GAM cost for that,
right? And for like an allocation money strapped team, like you don't want to have to spend money on international roster spots. You're better served spending it on players, right? So hopefully we're not pushed to that moment, and I'm guessing they're going to try to avoid having to do that at all, like as much as they can.
Well, we've teased players, so maybe let's go ahead and take a break, and then we will talk about Austin. One thing that I wanted to mention before we got into that is we had lunch on Tuesday of last week and left that lunch thinking surely they will sign some players. And then I think probably while we were complaining about it, walking back to the car, I think we got an announcement that Austin FC had signed a new player. So we'll cover that after the break.
Yeah, cover that, and then also some reports of potentially some other players coming in. So hang tight. We'll be right back with more Moon Tower Soccer. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And as a person who has watched a lot of sports, which has a lot of screaming billboard lawyers in them, I definitely appreciate the FVF approach.
You can go to FEF.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FEF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that serves the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. Amplify's team lives and works in the community, making them the experts on how members can achieve their financial goals.
What makes Amplify different? No bank fees. Amplify is the first financial institution in Texas to put an end to bank fees. In 2022, Americans paid almost $8 billion in overdraft fees alone. Millennials pay an average of $336 a year in bank fees, which works out to 6 Austin FC game tickets per person per year. You'll pay none of those bank fees with Amplify Credit Union.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower.
Our premier sponsor, McGuire Woods Consulting, helps companies and nonprofits navigate the political process at the Texas Capitol and also at the city and national level through lobbying, communication strategies, and general advocacy. And we can say, since we went to lunch with them last week, they're delightful people and a lot of fun to spend time with and have a lot of interesting ideas for how we can do more this year to connect with fans.
Yeah, absolutely. With offices across the country and in 10 MLS cities, including Austin, Houston, and Dallas, McGuire Woods Consulting is solidly Verde and Black. Learn more about our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com. All right, we are back. We have teased the official signing a couple of times throughout the show. We're going to talk about that and then move on to some reported. I think we'll call at least one of them a report, one of them maybe a rumor. Maybe these other two, we'll call them both reports. But the first one is officially official. This is Guilherme Biro. This is a 23-year-old left back from Brazil, currently playing at Mirassol in Série B, which is the second division in Brazil. I was looking at his name. Did you notice that Biro is not in his name anywhere?
No, I didn't notice that. Oh, right, because they have his full name in here. Is Guilherme de Trinidad Dubai?
I did some investigating. I think I know how to pronounce it, but okay, I'm probably going to do it wrong. But Guilherme, I think, is the first name. Da Trindade Dubas.
Wow.
But
no Biro.
Biro is like what he goes by, Guilherme Biro. And I was doing some investigating into that. And from best I could tell, there was a player like in maybe the 70s or 80s that went by Biro and had like a distinctive hairstyle. And Chris Haig, a friend of the show, Chris Haig, helped me track down some like resources on this story as well. But there's a lot of players that use the name Biro as a nickname in Brazil, and including another player named Guilherme Biro that plays in the Brazilian First Division. But it apparently it's just like a nickname given to people who have or have had at one time a similar hairstyle to the original Biro. And so that's where I think the Biro part of his name comes from. But that's what he goes by. I think that's what's on his shirt. So I guess that's what we'll be calling him here as well.
I wish we had more fun nicknames in this sport in this country. I feel like baseball used to be really good about having like guys like Red and Stretch and Iron Horse and stuff like that. And we sort of lost those. But Brazil, I do like Biro.
Brazil plays pretty fast and loose with the nicknames. It's just like whatever nickname you want can go on your shirt, and like every player has a nickname or just goes by their first name. So it's a fun approach to it.
Yeah. So I saw some. We'll get into him as a player. I think one of the things that I wanted to just mention. Some people were complaining about taking a guy to the second division. He did play in Serie A, the Brazilian top flight, from 2020 to 2022. So he's got experience there.
Yeah, he played. It came up through the youth system at Curitiba, and then broke into their first team in 2020. So got some starts and some appearances in the first division in 2020. Started 33 games in the second division in 2021, and then they moved back up. And he had 10 starts and several other appearances in the first division in 2022. He was then sold to Mirassol in 2023. Looking at their history, they were traditionally a lower level team, and they've been kind of moving up the ranks over the last few years. Broke into the Brazilian second division, And I imagine they're trying to either stay there or continue moving up, which is probably why they're looking at guys like him who had experience in the first division. So he is a player who has played and can play in the Brazilian first division, but just happened to be in the second division this year. So I wouldn't put too much stock in the fact that he's not in the first division there. And it's not all second divisions are created equal, right? Like Brazil is one of the richer soccer leagues in the world as far as the amount they spend on players, the talent that they have there. So the Brazilian, you're going to be in a second division, like the Brazilian one is not the worst one.
It's a good one. Yeah.
But
what do we expect from him as a player?
Yeah. So he's just looking at him like he has a big frame for a fullback. I think he's listed as 6'2". Pretty decent service with his left foot. I don't think it's the curve on his crosses is not as sexy as Kolmanić's, but pretty serviceable balls into the box. It doesn't seem, with his size, like he doesn't seem super nimble, but has decent top speed. Will definitely be able to compete physically much better than Kolmanić as far as like defending in the box and things like that. I was watching some clips of him on Y Scout and found a game where he was playing against Jefferson Savarino, who's played in MLS for, I think, a few different times at this point. He got cooked by Savarino a few times, but most defenders in MLS can say that they've gotten cooked by Savarino several times. So it's a good little like level setter to say like, okay, yeah, he's pretty good, but the best defenders in MLS are probably still going to beat him sometimes. From what I've seen of him, I think he's probably a little more skillful on the ball than Jean Kolmanić is. He's not Marcelo, he's not Dani Alves, but he still has a little bit of that Brazilian style that comes out every once in a while. Takes set pieces and has a pretty heavy shot on set pieces, so kind of a long distance shooter on those. I think Kolmanić might be a better crosser than him still, but overall, just the overall skill set, I think Biro is probably a more functional player overall. I think it's going to come down to just like looking at, like, is he stepping straight into the starting lineup? Is he Kolmanić's backup? I think it's probably a pretty fair match just based on their bodies of work so far. And I think it's going to come down to him. Just how quickly does he adapt to a new country, to a new league? How quickly does he settle into the system? Things like that. But I think he does have a chance to play quite a few minutes this year.
Yeah, and I don't, it's not like a earth-changing signing, obviously, overall, but it's the kind of signing that Austin has to have in order to be better this year than Austin was last year. Look, we don't know what John Kolmanić, although apparently he looks very swaggy, according to you, seeing him on South. Did you see him in South Austin? But like, we don't know if he's going to come back fully healthy. Even if he does, like, that's still a thin set of fullbacks. So it seems like a good piece to, at the very least, be depth, and hopefully, as a guy who's 23 and has a lot of game time in pretty high level soccer at this point in time, like, hopefully he makes the team better overall.
Yeah. I did see John Kolmanić walking down South Congress the other day. I was sitting at Home Slice eating pizza. I'll happy to report he did not stop for pizza at Home Slice. So I'm making healthy decisions leading into preseason there. But looked great. Just has long hair, dangly cross earring in one ear. Just looked great. So I'm predicting it now. John Kolmanić is going to look great coming back into off season or preseason after this year out with an injury.
All right, I love it. We also got rumors about a potential another fullback coming in the summer, and I think this is one of the, like, we talked about how, like, fullback and then just attack across the board were super thin. So I would say one more addition would be a welcome addition. So I think you did a little bit of research on this guy. Let's talk about Diesler, Michael Diesler.
I think it's probably Mikel Dessler.
Okay.
It's a guess.
I've got Matt Beasler in my brain now. I think is what causing me.
I think Mikel Dessler would be my guess. We can confirm if this comes to fruition. But yeah, this is reports coming both from I think it's Football Mercato in France, and then also a writer called Farzam Abul Hosseini out of Denmark. And We Are Awesome TV retweeted Farzam's report and said, a new player rumor, this guy, blah, 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 blah. And Farzam just responds, no rumor. And so this is why
I think that means fact, right?
Well, it's like, this isn't hearsay. I know that they're talking about this. And the way that he worded it is like, they're close. Like, this is close to being done. And FIFA rules allow, whenever you are in the last 6 months of your contract, you can start negotiating a pre-contract with another team. I don't think that applies within MLS moves. So like, an MLS free agent wouldn't be able to negotiate a pre-contract with another MLS team. But for international moves, I believe that's the case, even with incoming ones into MLS. So it's like, it seems like they are talking to this guy and they're trying to figure out just how to make this contract work. But reports are that it wouldn't be until the summer. His contract is valid through June, I believe. And so essentially until the end of the French season. He's playing in for Toulouse in France until the end of their season. Then he would be available to come to Austin if this happens. But again, not so different profile from Biro. He's on the right side, so he's 6'2", also kind of a lanky guy, not a high flying attacking fullback, but has good recovery speed. I think it's hard to say without seeing them run next to each other, but I think he's probably faster than Biro at his top speed. Really good game awareness from what I saw as well. Just seems to be really intelligent, makes really good decisions, and his experience really shows on the field. Just I saw a few times where he'd be up in the attack, they would lose the ball, and he would be in the right spot to kind of stop their counterattack in the right moment. And just like a lot of really smart things like that. Moving into spaces to support his teammates in certain areas, just seems to make the right decision all the time. So the last guy we got from Toulouse was Ruben Gabrielson, right?
I was gonna say you played a drop from him on this show already.
So I mean, we already kind of know the level there, right? And Ruben was even playing in the second division for most of his time there. Whenever they dropped down. Dessler I think he's been with them in the first division the whole time, if I'm not mistaken. But that's where he's playing now and is like a nailed-on starter for them in the French first division. So I think, I mean, looking at Biro and not being sure if he's going to be a nailed-on starter coming into the lineup, this guy is. Like, this guy's pedigree, the level he's playing at now, he should walk right into an Austin FC starting 11, right?
He should. And don't you feel like this is they were in League Two the first year he played for him.
Okay.
But the last 2 years he's been in League One. This seems like the kind of player that we hoped for when Rodolfo Borrell was added, right? Like we heard in the press conference, it's the talents in the summer, that he would be able to get players out of top 5 leagues and bring them in. Like, this would be consistent with, I think, what we were thinking about, like the best of Borrell coming in would possibly be.
Yeah, and so I do think that he would be a starter. I think another question, though, is a starter at what position? Because he's not like the overlapping guy. He's not John Gallagher that's going to just be swashbuckling up and down the sideline. I wouldn't be surprised if both Dessler and Biro were being looked at, maybe not full time, but at least part of the time, or for certain tactical setups, certain games, certain opponents, to be used kind of how Nick Lima was last year, where they would start in a back 4 and then shift into a back 3 as John Gallagher would bomb up one side, shift into a back 3 in the attack, and have one of these guys sit a little bit deeper, still having the ability and the freedom to kind of step forward into the attack as we get into that finishing shape in the final third, to be able to step forward, play a little bit, like get involved in the attack, but also be able to kind of defend in that back line and have the defensive prowess, the defensive capabilities of a center back. And this is kind of what we were talking about. And we talked about Owen Wolf potentially playing fullback this season. I think maybe the Biro signing and then this report as well, maybe are ending that experiment before it ever started. But it still kind of speaks to the same idea and solves the same problem, is having these flexible guys who can kind of shift into different parts of the field and different phases of play and be effective in all of those areas of the field as they do that. And I would not be surprised if these two guys were being looked at as the puzzle pieces that will fill that hole.
And do you think that I remember we were talking last week about Josh Wolf's sort of ability to learn and not be dogmatic and have sort of this like very, very defined, positional style of play was maybe like past its time. Like, do you think these are the kind of guys that allow like the basics of that system to come into play, but also allow the flexibility that maybe gives Austin like a different look? I could think that was probably the best Austin was last year. Was when they were like playing a little differently, and it seems like that these players would fit in that profile.
Yeah, I mean, I still think all of that is true, that he needs to learn to be a bit more flexible, but also having players that actually fit the system well and can be flexible in not just in where you tell them to stand, but the way that you're actually playing, like knowing how to mold themselves to the game, like. That's also very important for this kind of system work. And Pep Guardiola was in an interview was quoted as saying, like, the final third has nothing to do with tactics. It's about talent. And like that applies to this whole style, not just the final third. But yeah, like if you don't have guys who can actually do anything when you get down there, what does it matter if they're in the right spot or if they're getting in advantageous positions? Like, I think that's part of it too. Just like Wolf needs to learn to be a bit more flexible, or at least adapt to his players and to the game. But if he can bring in players that will suit his style better, that should improve the team as well.
Well, which touches on I think, even given the like who we've signed in the offseason, like still the biggest position of need is in that final third and in the attack. So that seems to naturally lead us into our next player rumor, which, again, we don't like to share like every possible rumor that anyone has ever posted anywhere, but this one has both Tom Bogert and Cesar Luis Merlo tweets about it. So that seems like a pretty reliable information set.
Yeah, and so what the report was here is that Austin FC bid $3 million for Miguel Borja, who's currently playing for River Plate in Argentina. The report is that bid was rejected, that River want more for him. And again, just the people who are saying this, like, this seems like it actually is happening. I think he's going to be 31 here pretty soon. So not the young, promising striker I think a lot of Austin FC fans are hoping for, but the guy scores. Like, he scores a lot of goals.
Yeah, and we've talked about how awfully expensive like the young strikers actually. Well, there are very few young strikers who are actually proven that you're ever going to be able to bring into MLS, and if you can, they're going to be super expensive. But this guy seems to fit the profile of somebody who's not. I mean, he's productive year after year after year and hasn't seen a huge drop off. Seems like the kind of guy that people should be excited about if Austin can close the deal. Yeah,
talking about his age. Like you said, like, if you get a young guy who scored the amount of goals that Borja has scored, like, you don't get him for $3 to $5 million. You pay $15 to $20 million for that guy. And so, like, those numbers affect each other. The younger guy who's maybe scored 5 or 6 goals in the French second division, like, you pay a few million for him and hope it works out. But, like, that's just kind of how the math works here. And so, it seems to me, so Borja has also moved around a fair amount. Haven't done a ton of research into this, but it seems like he's like fallen out at certain clubs, or maybe has been inconsistent and has fallen out of favor with coaches or whatever. So I don't know how much there is to that, but that could be something to it, where it's like, okay, this guy's good enough that, well, yeah, let's throw $3 million at him and see if they'll take it. Maybe he's not an ideal fit, but like if we can get him for this much, then yeah, we'll take him for sure. The reports were that there might be a second offer for him. We'll see how bad Austin wants him. But one thing that I found encouraging about this is that for this kind of fee, if they're paying $3 million for a transfer fee, and then a 30-year-old striker who scores this much is going to command a pretty big salary, this would have to be a DP spot, which means they are looking at a DP spot added this year.
Yeah, that's exciting no matter what. And so let's just to do the math on that. Like at what are the situations that open up that DP spot? Because right now there's not one available.
Yeah, I mean, it would just be keeping Musajite out on loan for the rest of the year and buying down Alex Ring with allocation money. That's all that has to happen at this point. And so if they're like in the market for this kind of player right now, it means either they're planning on, they think they have enough allocation money to buy down Alex Ring, or they think that maybe they're going to move on Alex Ring. Like one of those two things needs to happen, or another DP. It could be another DP that they move out, but they need to free up a DP spot. And that's the easiest way to do it is if they have enough allocation money is to buy down Alex Ring.
And they finally seem to have a little flexibility to be able to do that, right? Like it's funny. A few months ago, Austin seemed very stuck, and just from the players that got let go during this offseason, they've opened up some space to be able to do some things. It's just a matter of like getting them right.
Yeah, it does feel like they have some room to breathe now, which is it's a relief. It really is.
Yeah. One thing that happened. Oh wait, I guess one question I have before we get off this topic is why should an Austin FC fan care if it's 3.5 or 5.5 or 7.5? You know, it's not our money. And I mean, other than the fact that electric jellyfish may also go up like $2 more in the stadium, like what is about MLS where like ultimately these fees do matter?
So as far as but like roster build goes and the salary budget, if it's a DP, it doesn't matter. They're gonna hit at I don't know what the new number is, but it's like close to $700,000. They're going to hit the cap at that and that nothing else. So anything above that really only matters to Anthony Precourt and company. Anybody that's not a DP, that number matters a lot because that does count towards the salary cap, the transfer fee and their salary. And so if you spend a bunch of money on guys who don't hit, like Austin has repeatedly, then it hurts you. And Austin has seen that. So I think those reasons, that's when it matters and doesn't matter. On like removing the MLS lens from it, it matters because owners will stop spending money. Like we've heard reports that the Austin FC ownership group is not the richest in the league. Like they're lower down the table as far as that goes. If they lose interest and keep losing money on all these things, maybe they're going to spend a little bit less. And so I think like that part of it matters too. So far, it seems like they haven't lost that interest, but it could happen at some point.
Yeah, it could. And part of the reason they haven't is just all the things on the attendance and the sponsorships and all that, right? They're just printing money on the business side of things. But if the results on the field don't pan out because Austin has made so many mistakes on the on-field part of it, then that also can spill over to the other side to where there's not as much excitement and people aren't buying every single jersey the day it comes out. And now all of a sudden it does maybe make the owners a little bit more timid about spending that kind of money.
Yeah.
Right. The thing I wanted to go into, but that we talked about last week, we kind of knew Johan Romagna was going out, going back to South America, and I think you got all excited by the fact that we actually got somebody to pay money for him.
Yeah, I mean, so the report that had come out, it looked official enough that he was going to. Is it? I can't remember the team. San Lorenzo in Argentina, and the report was that it was going to be like a loan, and maybe they were paying a small loan fee for him. And for that, I was thrilled. I was like, this is a guy who is like a burden at this point as far as like his quality to cap space ratio goes. Like, it was a bad number. And so if we can get rid of him without having to continue to pay his salary, great. I call that a win. Reports come out the next day from Tom Bogert saying that San Lorenzo did not take him on loan, but a permanent transfer, and for $750,000. And this kind of blew my mind. Like, does that number not seem really big to you?
It seems really high, especially knowing that, knowing what we know, that Austin is motivated. Like, they need Johan Romagna to not be on the book. So it's not like he's an asset. Shouldn't be an asset with a ton of value where Austin's demanding top dollar for him.
Yeah, they're not in a good negotiating position, right? And so, like, I don't know. I could see a situation where maybe he had an option year and they were able to leverage that to bump up the price a little bit. Or maybe there's some weird like MLS budget magic going on where like his salary is going to be super low, and like they're like, okay, if they made a deal with San Lorenzo or something where just like make it look better on Austin FC's salary budget. I don't know what happened, but whatever it is, I'm very happy for it. Just the fact that we were able to get some money out of this deal for a player who I was happy just to let walk away.
Yeah, I guess going beyond that, there's still more players to come. There's still 4 supplemental roster spots, 4 senior slots open. We expect Austin to fill most, if not all those slots. I feel this is the first show in a while that I've felt like a lot of enthusiasm out of the roster build. But we're also in a little bit of there was the old phrase in baseball when spring training would start that hope springs eternal.
Yeah.
And we might be a little bit in that phase of it, but the money for Romagna, the flexibility from Driussi, like the types of the quality of players that Austin has like both signed and been linked with over the last week or so, like leave me more in a happier place than I was a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I am also much happier. Don't get me wrong. I don't think any of what has happened so far means Austin's a title contender this year. Far from it. I think they still have a lot of work to do and need to use these last few roster spots really wisely in order to be able to compete this year and like really even to like secure a playoff spot with what the depth chart looks like now. But they're moving in the right direction. They have raised their floor from my standpoint, from what I can see of these players they've brought in. I feel like the floor has been raised. They're going after some big name productive players, which is also encouraging. Yeah, that's the reason why I am more optimistic now. It's still going to take some time. This as Burrell, like we theorized if like Burrell was trying to manage expectations or if he actually meant this is going to take 3 windows. I think he meant it. This is going to take 3 transfer windows before he actually has it, which that 3rd transfer window is going to be next winter. And that's when a lot of these bigger albatross contracts will expire. And then he has real flexibility. So if he can set himself a decent base this season and then have that additional flexibility next offseason to really like shape this team into his vision, that's when I think we could really start to see some big differences.
Yeah, and another part of that is just a lot of this comes down to because it's salary cap league and there's so much parity is like health, right? Like if Austin's best 11 players stay healthy all year and things break right, then Austin can probably be like a pretty decent club. But nobody, especially not a team that's constructed in this way that needs some help to be built for sustained success, can deal with like Sebastian Driussi going out for 12 weeks or something like that. So that's really, it's a positivity, but it's like a precarious amount of positivity I think that we have right now about where this club's going.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's take one more break and then we'll come back with our last segment. Hang tight, we'll be right back.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Covert Ford. The Coverts have been meeting the needs of local car buyers for 114 years because of their service, financial expertise, and support after the sale.
In addition to supporting car buyers, Covert's an important part of the soccer community and the official automotive partner of Austin FC.
This week, we want to talk to you about a 2023 Ford F-150 XLT, stock number 223-1529. You'll get $13,107 off MSRP on this truck or 2.9% APR for 72 months. It's not compatible with any other offer. It's with approved Ford credit only. Not all buyers will qualify. Check the website for details.
If you're in the market for a new or used vehicle, be sure to check out covertford.com.
Moon Tower Soccer is also brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. The Sage Wilson Realty team is made up of Austin experts who are client-focused and have over 30 years of combined real estate experience.
If you or someone you know are in need of Sage real estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Be sure to check them out online at sagewilson.com. All right, we are back. As preseason kind of marches on, we get closer to the start of the regular season. We're starting to see some articles from national writers, some season previews, some depth chart rankings and things like that. How much of this should we pay attention to, Jeremiah?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think people shouldn't put too much stock, like good or bad, into it. I mean, one we talked about with Seth last week. It is very, very hard to know this league, and like how things are gonna go from year to year. And so much of these predictions are mostly like, this team was good last year, they're gonna be good this year. This team was bad last year, they're gonna be bad this year. Or maybe there's situations where there's a total upheaval, and so there's some prediction that they will get a lot better or a lot worse. I would imagine. I haven't read any Colorado Rapids previews, but I would imagine people are really, really high on them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, nobody knows how this is going to come together, and how this is all going to turn out. And I think it's particularly hard to be a national writer or national media personality when there's 30 teams in this league, and you can't know a great amount of detail about all of them or any of them other than just like the ones that get the most attention.
Yeah, so Matt Doyle put out an article today, I believe, and it was like what every team needs in the transfer window. And one of the things he mentions on there is he does mention a striker, but then the thing that he brings up is Emiliano Rigoni. It's like, yeah, he wasn't great, but like that's not Austin's biggest need, is it? Right? Like we have one striker on the whole roster.
Right, exactly. And yeah, and then we need, like, it's a creative attacking player, hopefully, a forward, but it can also come from anywhere across the front line. But yeah, I don't know how you could look at just having Jesse's artists and think that like that's not a great position of need. And it's funny. I was also going through just an example of how bad these can be from season to season. So everybody picked St. Louis City to finish last in the West last year. And this year, the St. Louis's biggest need is no pressing needs, because with the roster that they built last year that everybody thought was going to be the worst team in the league, they're so good they don't have anywhere they need help.
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to say that like these people are stupid, because they're not. I think, like we mentioned Matt Doyle. I think Matt Doyle is like knows a lot about soccer and is a really smart guy. But like you said, there's too many teams to cover, and I think the part where I get annoyed, and I think a lot of people get annoyed, is when people pretend to know. And like, we understand that like as content creators, like there is a pressure to know. You're supposed to be the one to know. And for us, it's a little easier because we're paying attention to one team. But when Matt Doyle is supposed to be an expert on 30 teams and then pretends to be an expert on 30 teams, that's when I get a little bit irked by it all. And so I don't think you should just write off all of these guys, because most of them are pretty smart people and know the game really well. They just don't necessarily know your team very well. And I think that's the thing. Like, if they're talking about Inter Miami or like the strengths of Denis Bouanga, they probably have watched a lot of those guys and probably do know a lot about them. But if they're talking about Austin FC's fullback depth or whatever, they probably don't really know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think ultimately the way I try to treat it is like sort of in broad sketches in like general ways. Like absolutely. Like I mean I listen to these shows every week and I read all the content And I mean, it's really good, but yeah, to like what you said, to like know like in-depth things about particular parts of the roster of every team is just not very realistic. And that's why like it's like support local media. You know, not here, obviously. We have a vested interest in supporting local media here, but you know, everywhere you're never going to be able to find coverage of any team in the league like you can like whoever the local creators are. And I think that's something that like we've learned from doing previews and stuff. You know, you're a lot better off when we're previewing like the next game week to go to whoever the Moon Tower Soccer of whatever team we're playing is, as opposed to what the national writers or national media are going to say about them.
Yeah. Speaking of like certain things you shouldn't pay attention to on the internet, there was another report online about Carlos Vela being approached by Austin FC, and I think I saw another one about Chicharito. Ignore this. I'm not going to say who they are or what their name is, but there's a Twitter account who trolls Tom Boger all the time, and then had in their Twitter bio that they worked for the striker for a while as they were like making up transfer rumors. Right? They did not work for the striker. Nobody at the striker knew who this person was. And so double check like who, whenever you see something floating around on the internet, again, just with media literacy in general, do a little investigating of like where this is coming from and whether or not you should believe them.
Okay, well, and now when you talked about the striker position and just random things that we learned off social media, Will Bruin is still in town and went to the monster truck races with Hector Jimenez and probably their kids. Early, I think this is another North End pod. No, but like, is Will Bruin a viable option for the third striker at this point in time in Austin if he's hanging around? Like,
yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, it wouldn't shock me to see him as a trialist in camp next week or some point whenever these preseason games start going on. So, I mean, we saw he could put in a shift, like especially if he's that third guy again, but maybe on like a senior minimum spot, because he wasn't before, right? He was on a senior spot before, wasn't he?
He was on a senior spot before, right? So if he was like Hector, if he was on the supplemental making the senior minimum, yeah.
And
he was a trialist last year, right? Didn't he come on a trial basis?
I believe so. I think that's right.
So there's a path to that, but that's one. You know, when Austin's looking to fill roster slots, they didn't specifically mention in the release about who was let go. You know, they mentioned that they were still negotiating with Hector, but I would be totally okay with Will coming back as the second. I mean, it's the third striker. Sorry, not as the second. Yeah,
I mean, if it's not my first choice, but if it happens, I'm not going to be too mad about it. And I think a lot of our feelings on, like, if Will Bruin does end up on this roster, a lot of our feelings about that are going to depend on who the other striker is on the roster, probably.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Anything else, Jeremiah?
No, I think we can wrap it up.
All right.
I guess before we get into like just the closing. I mean, this is. I know we have teasing next week, but like I'm excited about next week's show. So like, let's start with that before we do that.
Yeah. So we confirmed this today. We're going to have a player interview, first player interview of 2024, and it's going to be Ethan Finley. So we'll be reaching out to our Patreon members tomorrow on Tuesday when this comes out, asking for some questions. But yeah, very excited about that and excited for you guys to hear it.
All right, now going to the closing.
All right. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Come find us on the internet. I'm at LViajero87. Jeremiah's at jbentley_ATX. And that's on Twitter. And then we're at Moon Tower Soccer on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And then we're working on Patreon rewards for 2024. So we'll have some announcements about that pretty soon. Check out Phil West Substack, verdeallday.substack.com/moontower. And then I think that's all. Thanks so much for listening. Like we mentioned, we'll be back next week with that interview with Ethan Finley and then whatever Austin FC news pops up between now and then. Until then, I'm Lennon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Thank for nothing, you never.
La gente. Oh my God.